Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, your weekly dose of insider DevOps trends, AWS news, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A you can't find anywhere else. It's December 13th, 2023. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator for startups that helps teams who are overwhelmed with AWS. We do this using our over 200 Terraform modules that have been battle tested and downloaded over 10 million times. No matter where you find yourself on this journey, we're here to help your startup launch better products faster so you can free up bandwidth for innovation and nail your value delivery every time. And if you or your team have been banging your head against the wall with underperforming infrastructure, just head over to cloudposse.com/quiz, answer a few quick questions, and we'll chart a roadmap to success for free. Worst case, you get a clear roadmap for shoring up your infrastructure. Best case, we co-build it with you and empower your DevOps team in 90 days or less. Now, how can you maximize today's session? Just engage as much as you like. Our format's very informal. If you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, just go for it. Unmute yourself and ask away. For those on the recording, we host these calls live, so don't miss out. Join us live by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, cloudposse.com/officehours. Now, I do have one ask. If you find any portion of today's office hours valuable, share it with your team. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse or send us a short testimonial about the value you're getting. You can do that in our Slack team. Just go to slack.cloudposse.com. Remember, we're not simply creating content here. We are building a community, and we can't do that without you. So with that said, here are some announcements for this past week. First was something I saw through Anton's newsletter, a great list of 50 Terraform interview questions. I didn't realize that it was specifically Terraform Cloud, to be honest. But it is still nonetheless helpful. I think it's important to be aware of why tools like Terraform Cloud are beneficial, even if you aren't, using it yourselves. There are other ways to skin the cat, if you will. So here's some technical deep dive questions, I guess, on Terraform Cloud. Next one is a announcement from reInvent that I didn't see, but was something on the DR side, which is Amazon's Route 53 adds something called Application Recovery Controller, which has this zonal autoshift. I don't believe we talked about that specifically. So this is the ability to siphon off the requests that are going to a downed availability zone automatically. Some might say, well, we could already do this with health checks. My guess again here would be that this is something that can do it faster, possibly, with less interruption, less failure. I'm not sure. I'm curious if anyone knows, how this is an improvement over like regular ALB health checks, for example.
I think it knows that there are outages in the region, independent of your application health checks.
Gotcha.
Like I think this is tied into like Amazon's own health checks of region health.
So
and
added
if
the level of understanding.
Yeah, and if they understand that there's and if they believe that there's some sort of an outage, it ships. But just to be clear, like application recovery controller that existed already. It basically could just do. It used to be able to do cross region shifting of it now, so it would shift your traffic from like US East 1 to US East 2 if it detected something else was on. This is just an additional feature that now does it within specific zones like themselves, like AZs, without having to shift an entire region, basically.
Yeah. I mean, the worst situation is where you have a brownout too, and your health checks might be passing, but your performance is degraded in some way that you're not catching. So I could see the benefit there. Cool. Next announcement.
Also, just to be clear, if an AZ is down, and presumably the health check, the thing doing the health check may also be down. Like the load balancer endpoints that talk to your applications are in the regions where those issues are there. So
Yeah.
like you may not actually be able to run the health checks. So DNS will never get affected. It will just send it to a load balancer that's not working.
Yeah.
In this case, basically, they can use DNS to make sure that that doesn't happen. But I think that's the other thing.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about it that way. Obviously, we're kind of, surmising how things are implemented, but that would seem like a logical consideration.
Yeah.
Cool. Next announcement is yet another Terraform registry. There's something going on here. I don't understand the madness behind why there are just so many. What's this awesome Terraform? Why there are so many registries out there. I was doing a search in awesome Terraform, and yeah, 10 closed PRs. Well, maybe one is not merged, but on Terraform registries. What's interesting about this is by Tier Mobility, and I know Tier Mobility publicly is one of Spacelift's earliest customers, and Spacelift does have a registry. I'm curious what the background story is and the need to create yet another registry. And if I was making a registry, I'd like to make a proxy between something like an OCI registry a la ECR and the Terraform, so that you can just use all the methods you're used to using for publishing artifacts, and then have that translated to individual protocols like the Terraform registry. All right. Next announcement is Alpine Linux has dropped a lot of the HashiCorp packages due to the non-open source license. I mean, obviously, Alpine is a pretty small representation of deployments out there, but it is an example of some of the ramifications of switching licenses.
Yeah. Although it's a huge part of probably a lot of Docker deployments out there, because people for a long time were using from Alpine do whatever because it was so small and quick. So I bet a ton of people have this in production actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So if your Alpine builds failed after your latest Dependabot or Renovate bot update, now you know why. And I guess the recommendation is here for one of these packages at least.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see the whole list of your announcements, but there's also a movement now to do the open
Yeah.
source. There, you got it. Yeah, that's there.
Yeah, so it's very early, but yeah, what Matt's alluding to is Vault has been forked now as well. Looks like the initiative actually began some time ago, but it has surfaced now under a project of OpenBow, similar to OpenTofu, going on a little bit of the Asian or Japanese inspired naming, probably an homage to Mitchell Hashimoto and his background. Anyways, this project, rumor has it, is sponsored or backed by, at least in some portion, by IBM. No one can officially come out and say that. However, the project is being worked on out in the open. And if you do look at the committers on the project and where they work, you'll kind of understand the companies backing the project. According to this post on the register, there is potentially some interest in the Cloud Native Foundation. Where was it? I thought I saw it in here. I'm pretty sure it was in here. Sorry, not Cloud Native, Linux Foundation, which operates the Cloud Native Foundation, possibly taking it up, but it would be probably not as accelerated in status as the OpenTofu project. That would be my guess.
Well, I think the other point that makes it clear is the Linux Foundation, the subgroup or whatever that they're going to bring that into is actually run by a bunch of IBM engineers.
Oh, okay.
So that there's an easy path, obviously, for that to get in there.
Yeah, maybe they grease the wheels a little bit then. Interesting. So this was also posted on Hacker News, and if you want to hear more of the discussion behind it and others, that's a good post to check out. We'll be sharing all these links, of course, as well.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump forward in your thing, but when I saw that it recommended OpenTofu as a replacement for Terraform, it made me think of the OpenBow for Vault.
Yeah, of course, it would have been a natural segue to have that as the next topic on my list. I didn't properly organize it. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so that's that. Anybody have any other context to add to that whole OpenBow situation?
It's definitely tastier than tofu.
Indeed. All right. Next announcement is on my list here. Let's see here. Well, there's been a lot of talk about the OpenTofu registry. Progress on that continues. They bootstrapped the registry in some way, importing all of the popular modules out there. If you were not already publishing your modules in the Terraform registry, I believe you'll probably need to publish them here. What's nice is the transparency and the Git friendliness that they're taking to this. So they're organizing in this lexicographical manner, broken down by prefix here. So the first letter, so if we drill into C, then you'll see all the module providers underneath that. I believe Cloud Posse is also here, for example, and then you see all of our modules underneath that tree, and then a JSON file with all the versions. Now, this was programmatically done. You can see under apply automatic. I think it's an interesting thing here. If they're going to be literally updating this all the time, that seems like this Git repo is going to get very large with its Git history. I wonder how that's going to scale. Also, if they are doing this, I mean, I haven't investigated this anymore. If anyone knows, like, what would be interesting is if there's a GitHub Action somewhere that one can incorporate in one's own workflows when a new version is released to notify this registry and update it. Generate and deploy. So here's a shared workflow. Shared workflow. All right. Moving on, unless anybody has something to add to that one. All right. So here's something I came across this week I thought was cool. We've brought up previously the endoflife.date service, which is great, aggregates a lot of the announcements about when versions of popular things will be deprecated. One to keep an eye on, for example, is Amazon EKS. And if you're on 1.24, support for that is going to end in 1 month, 2 weeks. So you better upgrade. Well, they've also incorporated some basic API with this end of life service. And what's cool is there's this GitHub action for that. Then you can call. It is a work in progress, as they announced, and looks like no recent work has been done here. Also, no versions have been released or published, and it is in draft mode. nonetheless, it shows plenty of examples here on how you could use the GitHub Action to test if the version of some software you're using is end of life. Now, how do you get the version into the action? I think that's an exercise still left up to you as the implementer. Unless you literally hard code it. Oops. All right. Next announcement. We talked about that one. And the last one that I have was a slow week, news week for me, was Terraform, HashiCorp Terraform 1.7 beta 2 dropped. Add some features. Most notable is the ability to have mock providers. So I guess you can run offline tests and speed up your testing. It wasn't clear to me, and it seems what the effort is. I assume this is a burden that's offloaded then to Terraform provider creators to provide mock interfaces, and which Terraform providers have that. I don't know anything more about that. I'm just guessing here. Matt, do you know anything about that one? Or
I don't. I saw this.
Yeah.
Jotted it down as, oh, take a look at that at some point, but I haven't had a chance to.
Yeah. All right.
I saw this, and I think there were a couple features in one of the later 1.6 releases, and also 1.7 now, that are going to make, like, I don't know, like, I think we're going to quickly start to see OpenTofu and Terraform diverge at this point. There were some things in there about Terraform, specifically for Terraform Cloud, and doing something. I remember seeing something, and I jotted it down. I don't have the note right near me, but there was something in there that I saw that I was like, this is going to, this is going to change things a little bit. And then the same thing. Now this is another one, like, maybe this one is going to be the same, I guess, but that now they have to go, like, implement this in 1.7, or else the providers that have this functionality, unless the provider API is completely unchanged, like, you're now going to have to support these, like, mocked providers potentially to provide the same support. I don't know. There's going to be a few things, I think, coming up. I can't remember what it was that I saw that made me think, like, oh, this is going to be the first diversion point, but I'll have to go back. Maybe I can find it if I go back and look at my notes. I wrote it down somewhere.
It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, that point is coming. It's inevitable. I just wonder kind of how soon and how significant it is.
Matt, were you maybe thinking about the stacks functionality?
I wasn't, but that's an interesting point as well. I don't quite see how that's. Well, maybe it was related to that. That if they build that notion into, like, Terraform core, then that's a fundamental change, obviously, from the way things were. But I think there was a smaller nuanced change as well that I saw. But that's a good one to bring up.
Yeah.
I'm having a memory lapse, so
it's understandable. These things move quickly.
Yeah, but yeah. So with that announcement here, they talk about, we brought this up last week. Yeah, these TF stack HCL files.
Yeah,
but that's really at the project level, so I don't see that affecting as much, other than, and this is obviously a Terraform Cloud, which is already a paid, commercial or enterprise offering.
They are saying they're going to add community support, like like it would make its way. If you look up community edition in this, yeah, so it will be incorporated in upcoming releases of the community edition of Terraform. It's, like, confusing in terms of what that will look like. Yeah, and that was the thing I was thinking could be interesting. Like, hey, will OpenTofu support that? Do they want to do their own design? There's some interesting ideas there that
Yeah.
could come about, but yeah, who knows?
I mean, this is where it gets interesting because, yeah, like when it was first announced, the Stacks thing, that there was like some sort of a patent pending on it and so forth.
Oh, I didn't see that. That's interesting. I'm not surprised if they did try and patent it because they they definitely put a lot of research and thought into how they were going to build this for Terraform Cloud. I think it was like probably one of their most asked for things. I know that I was bugging them about it for a year or
Mm.
two. Not for Terraform Cloud, but just from a Terraform, like letting them know that it was a big problem, as we all know it is. But yeah.
Yeah. Um, all right. Let's see. Next, any other announcements that caught anyone's attention here? Okay. Nothing looks like. All right, let's jump into Q&A then. Let's up some tabs here. There we are. All right, Q&A, fire away. I have nothing lined up. Anyone have something that they've been toiling with this week and want to bring it up? This is totally open-ended. Can be observational, philosophical, career advice. We've had that before.
I do have a question around AWS Web ACLs. I'm not sure if anyone here has played around with it for a bit, but I am trying to manage Web ACLs across multiple AWS accounts, but centrally. So we're using CloudFront with with the WAF Web ACL, and right now we're provisioning CloudFront distributions in one account, and along with their respective Web ACL roles, and we have like some defaults that we're using, but it's a little cumbersome to manage it that way. I heard about managed role groups, but it seems like that's like a partner AWS seller marketplace exclusive type of thing. Wasn't sure if anyone knew of a way to, or if it's even possible to do it within an org or ideally across orgs.
Across OUs, you mean?
Um,
Or you mean granting resources?
Yeah, granting the Web ACL resource in particular across orgs. Not sure if anyone here has done that.
Gotcha.
It seems like you can do it if you could basically create these marketplace sellable roles, like managed role groups, but you can't. I could not figure out a way to do it as a average user of AWS.
At least within your org, I believe that Firewall Manager lets you do that.
Okay.
You can actually create all the rules like inside there and then apply them to different places. Like that's kind of like what its job is.
Oh, cool. Do you happen to know Firewall Manager includes Web ACLs?
I believe so.
Okay, cool. I'll check that out. Thank you.
Fundamentally, it's managing WAF, no? Or
yeah. That's why I think it should. Says newest version of WAF as well as WAF v2 and AWS managed rules for AWS WAF.
Oh, awesome. Cool. I will give that a shot. I get a warning when I clicked on it to enable something at the org level. So I think I just need to
you need the principal the principal for firewall management to be enabled in your org, which if you want to do it by ClickOps, it's the thing where you just go in and look at all the enabled services, and firewall manager is one of the things that you have to opt into. But
Cool,
if you do it by Terraform, there's another way too.
I'm in a dev sandbox account, so I will ClickOps this time, and then I'll forget when I want to actually roll it out. So thank you, appreciate it.
Then
No problem.
kind of curious. I mean, if you're able to share, if not, that's all right too.
Yeah,
what are you trying to solve doing this?
It's a great question. So we have someone that we're working with, not had, but we're actively working with someone that has like 200 CloudFront distributions, and they didn't have a WAF in place, and they get these DDoS attacks. And the reason they have 200 distributions is their customers that they work with, they need individualized SSL certificates. So now we're managing basically a bunch of distributions, and we're using the WAF that's that you can add into CloudFront. And we've also broken that out into multiple accounts. So rather than having all of their prod and non-prod in the same account, we've broken that out, basically took all 200 and broke it out into about 4 accounts based off their requirements. And on our end, we have like a little operator that was managing the Web ACLs, and we didn't get the Web ACL rules correct the first time, and I imagine there's going to be a few more iterations. So we're trying to figure out the best way to basically let them manage the Web ACLs for all 200 CloudFront distributions without having to do a whole lot of coordination with them. And this way we're not in the middle of them updating things. So we're managing part of their platform for them, and then we want them to be able to own the Web ACL rules in this case. We just don't want to be the go-to for that on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's probably good from a liability perspective not to be responsible for those ACL rules. But yeah, this firewall manager, if that works out, seems like exactly what it was built for.
Yeah, and I just looked it up too, just to see that firewall policies and rules and rule groups all support RAM. So you could then RAM share those things to other accounts in other organizations as well. If you had like a central place that you could do that. So
cool. Yeah, that sounds like the ideal solution for us. I'm curious if we could do it across orgs. That'd be really nice for us. But,
for sure. Like RAM definitely works across orgs. Like you basically just have to share it, and then you share it with an account that's in any organization, and then there's an exception. Like it basically does an invitation accept handshake, and then once you do that, like those resources appear in the other account, and then you can attach them to, like in this case, those rules would show up in the account that you're sharing it with, and then you can attach them to the CloudFront distributions that are in that other account.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the one part that's tripping me up here is you're doing this at an org level rather than an account level, where a lot of the other services seem to be account based, but perhaps it's just how firewall manager was designed. It feels like it's organizational, like at the highest hierarchy, which I just find unusual.
Yeah, that's the idea about it, is that it's one of the services that's meant to be able to manage this across all of your accounts in your organization, because they realize that it's really difficult to do exactly what you were just talking about, like creating consistent rules across like all of your CloudFront distributions, as an example, like in those things.
Got it. Cool. So, I'll definitely be playing with that. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it, guys.
Cool. All right. Next, any other questions we can get answered today?
There's one topic that I've been working on this week that I could bring up.
Yeah, do it.
So a couple months ago, AWS announced support for automatic user provisioning with Google Workspaces. So what that led us to believe was that you don't need to use a tool like SSO Sync to automatically handle user and group provisioning in AWS. But the trick is that groups are still not handled. So there's no way for those groups, even though they're automatically provisioned, to be synced into groups in AWS Identity Center. So SSO sync is still required.
So the question is, are we not seeing something? But I thought Jeremy White, you had done something for that. No, Jeremy?
So I had just followed the how-to, and at the bottom of the how-to, it just describes using groups. So to me, I thought that meant that the group creation just had to be on a API level. But I think, right, so Dan, you made a support request, right, to AWS, and that was the reply?
Yeah, so the automatic groups do work. Oh, sorry, I misspoke. Automatic users do work. So users will be automatically synced into Identity Center, but groups will not be. So then what we thought was, well, if we can create the groups with API, then the users could be automatically added to those groups. But still, no, the groups, every single user has to be added to every single group, both in Identity Center and in Google's, or you could use SSO Sync, which would automatically add them to groups.
But the fun part about that is, isn't the UI locked down once you enable automatic provisioning?
Yeah, that too. So the other part is that
So
once you've enabled automatic provisioning, it's impossible to add users, or it's impossible to create and manage groups from the console. Instead, you have to use the API to manage and create groups.
right, and this is again why I just had that assumption, and then the other fun part about this, Eric, was that when I was working with another customer on this, right, it sounded like as if it was working, and so that was where I was like, well, this, I mean, otherwise, why would you want to
Yeah.
try to use auto provisioning if it locks down your UI?
It just
So
seems so weird. It's like the number one reason why you'd want to implement this is because you have a lot of users that you got to manage this way, and centralized context, and then you can't manage it with groups.
Well, it pulls them into AWS at least, so they can log in, but then they have to be assigned to groups to get permission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone dealt with this and come up with a solution other than SSO Sync, the open source tool?
Yeah, I looked at the documentation for this, and it seemed to indicate that, like in the GitHub repo waiting for it, or somewhere, I forget, somewhere where I was looking at it, it actually said like groups are not synced. Like it actually said it in the docs, and then I was like, well, this thing is useless without that.
And another gotcha with this SSO sync that I heard reported in the past week or two from a customer was apparently it had a hiccup. Yes, I remember. Yeah, Dan, it was somebody you were working with, right? Yeah, this had a hiccup, deleted all the groups, and then re-added all the groups, but that caused, they were referencing, I think, maybe the groups by ID or something, and then those were no longer valid.
yeah, I was that the same that I had a call with as well.
Yeah,
where
the same one.
yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting sort of factoid that when you're working with all of this, the UUID changes on the groups when you do stuff like that, and that's actually what behind the scenes is assign those permission sets. So you just kind of reset everything. That kind of happens with SSO Sync.
It just feels that after 10 years or 15 years or however how long this has been around, this should be, why are we still solving how to log into AWS?
It's actually, in this case, it's actually Google's fault. Like
Yeah.
there's a well-defined protocol SCIM, and Google just doesn't fully support it.
Has
So
Google ever come out and said why, or like on what
I don't
principle?
know. I don't know why that is. Yeah.
All right. Well, Dan, doesn't sound like there were any takers on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is a solution. I think the solution is to use SSO sync.
Yeah. Well, good thing we didn't deprecate it yet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do
But
have
we
a
can
component for
deprecate
that.
part of it if you want. So you could remove the part where it provisions users and have users provisioned by the integration, and then have SSO sync just associate users to groups.
I wonder what the preferred route would be.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just do it all with SSO sync so it's all in one location and there's not two different things managing users or groups.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. I guess unless there's some way one could separate concerns from a security perspective, that association of permissions is done with sync and then adding users is done with SSO, then it's kind of checks and balances maybe, but or overkill.
At the end of the day, they're both syncing from the same canonical source, so it makes sense to me to just keep using SSO sync until the other one is fully supported.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions we can get answered today?
I've got one.
Go for it.
Okay, so I've been looking around the internet for a reference best practice repository that implements AWS's, I guess what you would call foundational setup for, I guess, 90% of everyone on AWS. And I just can't find any examples. And I was wondering if you guys might have some. To be a little bit more specific, so AWS does have the foundational repository on GitHub.
Yeah.
It's called Cloud Foundations on AWS. And GCP does a really good job. They've got the foundational toolkit, which actually walks you through the why you're doing something and how to do it and how it all integrates in a single code base. And I'm wondering if maybe you guys have something or know of something that just implements the best practice control tower, your standard rules around security, etc.
Yeah, so that is a great thing, and it's probably one of the most sought after things or searched for things. You see probably 3 posts a week on Reddit asking the same question, and almost like project management systems, there's no one that wins and there's no right answer, and it depends a lot on what you're looking for. So the long and short of it is, as it relates to Cloud Posse, that is what that's our primary business model. That's what we sell our reference architectures for AWS using Terraform and how we do it. Right now, all of those are behind a paywall. It's how we operate as a company. Stay tuned. Early next year, we'll be publishing more of these publicly, giving away bits and pieces of it, but maybe not the full-fledged the whole kit and caboodle. All right. That aside, control tower. So, I mean, one of the fundamental problems with control tower and what you're asking for, okay, taking a step back. My assumption, reading between the lines of your question, is how to do that with infrastructure as code. But that might not have been the assertion. If it's with infrastructure as code, then the problem here is immediately control tower. But I'll pause there for a second and let you chime in.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. What I'm looking for is just a baseline repository that I can assess and make some changes to, and that'll be just what I use, for these types of projects. And I've been building one myself because it just seems like no one else has done it, other than I suppose you guys, and release this. It just seems like something that should
there's
exist.
definitely an opportunity here, and one of the reasons we want to publish that. I guess it comes down to, I think you will find examples once you start looking out there. We brought them up recently here, but I'll show you like a very robust one, so to say, or it's been a lot has been invested in it. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right one here. Yeah, this is the one I'm thinking of. So this is kind of cool. This is out of the UK. The Ministry of Justice is publishing their platform, how they manage all their environments and do everything with Terraform. And it's a good reference example that is public, since obviously ours and what we do, I can't share right now. Now, first thing that jumps out to me about this, though, and this is the problem with reference architectures, is know your audience, or who are you targeting? And they built this with a very specific consumer in mind within, I guess, the UK Gov, who would be using this. I don't think this is the right reference architecture, probably, for the majority of other companies who are just trying to get something off the ground. And then that's where it comes down into the assumptions. So how much infrastructure is the right infrastructure for you? So when we talk about Cloud Posse in our reference architecture, we regularly turn down business because we don't think that our reference architecture would be a fit for their company. Maybe their team is too small, their needs are different. They have a lot of sunk costs in an existing AWS organization, and they don't want to start fresh with a greenfield. They want to try and do something brownfield where you renovate what you have, which is very difficult to do. So so in going down that route, our reference architecture starts with about 12 or 14 different AWS accounts, which each have their own specific purposes and so forth. But if you're a small, two-man shop and don't have strict compliance needs and don't need to have the governance and checks and balances that a larger company would need, this would be overkill, and you can get by with less. As it relates to Control Tower, which is Amazon's recommended best practice for managing your organization, it was only announced at reInvent this year, last month, API support and forthcoming Terraform support for that. So if you are adamant about infrastructure as code, using Amazon's best practice of using Control Tower, you couldn't even do that as code, really. There's account factories for Terraform, but that's a separate thing.
You couldn't do it with Terraform code, but you can do it with CloudFormation.
You could manage a Control Tower with CloudFormation the whole time. No, you could manage parts of it.
You can manage what is deployed to each of your accounts with CloudFormation,
but not the Control Tower itself.
Yeah, the Control Tower itself, they run you through a wizard in the UI. That's how they've always done it.
Yeah, exactly. And then account factories for Terraform basically shoehorn Terraform, I believe, into that framework of using CloudFormation somehow to run things through a code build and code pipeline and automation and things like that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I guess my point is just it's hard to find what you're looking for that suits.
And even out of the box, though, when you deploy Control Tower and you vend an account, it isn't like you've suddenly got AWS best practices. There's still a whole bunch of things you need to do to make sure that the accounts that you're vended, that you vend out of Control Tower, essentially get all the things that you want deployed to them. You only get a handful of things like that as best practices kind of out of the box. It's still not even everything you would recommend. It's just they make it really hard to do things in a best practices way.
And best practices can be contradictory or conflicting. It's kind of
even their best practices. If you just take Amazon's best practices as law, and you want to adhere to them, it's not easy to do. There should just be a new account, click yes, adhere to best practices, and then it deploys everything with the best practices in them, and that would be a great start. But you can't do that even. So,
I've got just a quick follow-up, but if others need to ask questions, then I'll wait. But if not,
Doesn't look like anyone has queued up any questions. If you do have a question, please raise your hand or queue it up. Otherwise, let's just keep going. All right, go for it, Michael.
Yeah, so Terraform Cloud, I don't know if that's on topic, given a lot of the recent changes, but it still seems like one of the best ways to deploy Terraform code.
Yeah.
And now that Gruntwork, TerraGrunt, they can't use like the new upcoming Terraform version. I'm just in this sort of I really have no idea how to use Terraform workspaces. Like that was something we kind of avoided. I don't know if you guys did, but Terraform workspaces were not something that were used quite commonly. And just how are you using Terraform? How do you structure your Terraform cloud such that it just makes sense? I mean, creating workspace. Okay, let's say in this directory we got environments here. Like technically, that would have to be another workspace, right? And every subfolder, well, maybe the subfolders in there would have to be workspaces. Let's say prod, dev, whatever. And then how do you actually manage that at a top level such that you could plan all if that doesn't seem to be a thing anymore?
So that's a great question and a lot to unpack there. So first thing just to address head on is workspace and the term, which is interesting because HashiCorp themselves overloaded their own term for that. So just to be clear, the Terraform Community Edition concept of a workspace is not exactly a Terraform Cloud workspace. So even if you weren't using workspaces with TerraGrunt, which would be the Community Edition workspace, those aren't the same thing in Terraform Cloud. So then the question morphs into how to manage those workspaces within Terraform Cloud, the commercial offering, and then what about the plan all? So the plan all, first of all, to set the context there, like it's pretty well understood at this point. You don't want to have all your Terraform code in one root module. I always call these things the Terralith. You don't want the Terralithic module because while it's easy, your blast radius is massive. Things take longer and longer to plan. It becomes brittle and so forth. So you break it out. But as soon as you break it out, now you have this problem of dependencies and, well, one thing has to be planned after the next. And yeah, this plan all command in TerraGrunt, for example, is nice on the surface, but it really doesn't give you what you want. Because when you have these ordered dependencies, you really don't know what the subsequent plan is until you first plan and apply the preceding component. Otherwise, it's just I don't know, false promise of what's going to happen. So that's why plan all. But what you're talking about directly segues into HashiCorp's latest announcement.
Yes, Stacks.
Yeah, Stacks, exactly.
Which TerraGrunt won't be able to leverage. So
yeah, they won't. But I mean, conceptually, Stacks is something all the tools out there these days implement, right? So you have Spacelift doing it. You have Cloud Posse's Atmos tool doing it. I think TerraGrunt conceptually has the similar concepts, and TerraMate and so forth. But what I wanted to just here was, and under here, they have a recent post going into Stacks, and the idea here is how you have this pipeline essentially, where you can have one component that passes its outputs to another component that passes its output to another component. You can set up those dependencies, and it goes into how you would set that up with the with these TF stack.htcl files and so forth. I don't know that it goes to the extent that it explains how you would organize that from a file system perspective. I can always show you how we do it at Cloud Posse, but that builds on another tool called Atmos, which is in the category of something similar to Terragrunt, but takes a different approach. I'll wait for follow on there.
From me?
Yeah. Any follow-on questions on that, or?
Yeah, I would like to learn a little bit more about that. So I have never used any other tool outside of Terraform and Terragrunt. I got involved in this space in 2015, so I don't think I hadn't recognized Cloud Posse until maybe 4 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
no, that's a long time.
the,
I mean, 2015 and Terraform, that's an eternity. You know,
yeah,
hasn't been around too long. I mean, 2015, I mean, that was like Terraform 0.5 or something around that time. So that's a really early time to adopt Terraform. And you've been along for the ride and everything that has happened in Terraform and how the language itself has progressed. So I'll show you kind of what we do and what you can maybe expect some version of in the future. So here's Cloud Posse's own infrastructure repository. It's broken down as follows. So this is kind of what you were curious about, how to organize the infrastructure. So I'm sure there's a lot you can glean from this, even if you don't adopt our tooling. First thing is, you want to have a README that anyone who jumps on board can quickly get up and running with everything. You'll want to have a Docker file with a toolbox that any new engineer on the project can use so that they don't need to install a bunch of tools natively. And you have issues when you have Windows users and Mac users at different versions, Mac users on an Intel versus ARM and so forth. So the toolbox image is how you achieve that. We publish a toolbox image that's free and open source called geodesic. And then in that toolbox image, which is kind of like Vagrant, but in a container, you can have all of your tooling there. So now we've solved the problem. Hey, it works on my machine, but not on somebody else's. Then it's your library. These are what we call components, which are opinionated Terraform root modules. Now, in the Cloud Posse approach, we decided that we weren't only going to support Terraform, we support other tools like Helm and Helm File, Docker, and so forth. And those are all building blocks, different components of your infrastructure. So we broke it down by tool. Under here, we have these root modules. These are what you'll find publicly under Cloud Posse's Terraform AWS components under the modules folder here. So we publish everything there. And the thing to call out here is, and the first decision to be made in working with your reference architecture is, what are the blast radiuses? What are the delineations between state and component of your root module? So we think about like the VPC as one of your states. We think about maybe your EKS cluster as another state. We don't stick those in the same state. And one of the things you'll see in a lot of the reference architectures I look at is they have a different opinion. They'll couple your VPC with your Kubernetes cluster and a database, all in the same root module. Yeah, they're using child modules, but they've created this bespoke root module. And that's what we have tried to want to avoid. But when you do that, what happens is you're shifting the burden to configuration, and you're shifting the burden to the user to know how to apply all of those changes and the order. So you're familiar with Terragrunt, and Terragrunt lets you do that. Well, I'll show you how we go about that. And if I drop into the VPC component, you'll see it's just vanilla Terraform code that we have there. They're variables, as you would expect in any Terraform root module that accept inputs. But the thing that's noticeably absent here is, how many VPCs do we have? In what region do we have them? Where are those deployed? And that's all configuration. So we've abstracted that out So when you look at our infrastructure repository, you look at the stacks, that's where we put that. And it took us a long time to figure out how to organize it best on the file system, which was one of your other questions, like, you have some folder and what goes underneath that folder. And I've seen so many of these reference architecture examples over the years and seen how companies do it, but I've not seen anyone organize it exactly the way I'm about to describe it. And once you hear it, it's kind of obvious. So it's pretty common that you'll see a folder somewhere. It'll have your environments. It'll have dev, staging, production. All right. Where does your audit account go? Where does your security account go? How do you distinguish between your different organizations where your infrastructure is? And how does it work? Like if you're on Google Cloud versus AWS and so forth, the organization might be different. Well, on Amazon makes it very clear how it should be organized. You have your organization. That organization has organizational units. Those organizational units have accounts. Those accounts have regions. Those regions have resources. So that's what we have. So you have your organizations. In this case, we called RCP Live. You have your organizational units. So Plat is where we put your standard dev staging production accounts. Now, if you have multiple dev staging and production for like different teams, you'd have different OUs. That would be our recommendation as a best practice, depending on your org size, of course. And then you go into production and you have everything organized by region. And then you go into the region, then you see all the configuration for that region. So it mirrors very similar what you see in AWS through the console and how things are organized on the file system. And we've been able to abstract that configuration away from your Terraform business logic, your root modules, so that you can compose any number of VPCs, any number of times, any number of Kubernetes clusters, any number of times, without writing a single line of Terraform code, because it's all configuration. And that configuration is what we call a stack configuration. It's what you're looking at here. And that is what's this tool that we wrote called Atmos, also free and open source. That's what that builds on. We go into all the concepts here, validation, vendoring, and things that you would need for a large-scale infrastructure.
Nice. Thank you so much. I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah, my pleasure. And and then once you have all that, you need some way to deploy that. And that's where, that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I just want to add, since we're on this topic, not that I want to be a downer of the whole thing, but Atmos isn't going to do anything for the licensing woes of being able to use newer versions of Terraform that Terragrunt couldn't do either. Right?
Yeah.
If specifically the reason.
So Terragrunt, with Terragrunt, you can, for your own purposes in your own production environment, so long as you as a company are not providing that as a service to another company and hosting it for them, can use Terraform, HashiCorp Terraform, BSL licensed, 1.6, 1.7, etc. No problem. The same way you can use Atmos, no problem. Where you get into a problem is now if you create a hosted service running Terragrunt, which calls Terraform, you have a problem. Same as if you create a managed service for Atmos running Terraform.
So I can use Terragrunt with the latest version of Terraform as of today, no problem.
Yes, in your company for your company's purpose.
I would just.
Well, I'm
not
not
that I want to be crazy.
Yes,
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
I would not give out legal advice on this issue.
Yeah.
But that's our interpretation of it currently.
Yeah, Matt is totally right.
That's our opinion.
It's not legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I haven't gotten a actual
legal opinion on it.
Legal opinion, or I haven't gotten what's the other thing you call it? When HashiCorp tells you, yes, you can go ahead and do this in a legal form.
Yeah. Like I know what you mean, but I can't think of the term either.
A testament or something to that. That's not it either.
But one of the problems is, the Gruntwork folks, they're not going to be leveraging newer versions of Terraform in Terragrunt.
Sure, they're gonna pivot and use OpenTofu as their what they test against going forward, which that makes sense.
And I think you're going to see that, more and more. But I mean, the good thing is I don't think, run this, take this link, run it by your lawyers and see what they say. The weird thing is the license, the FAQ has become the license. And I think they were even saying somehow like they consider this FAQ legally binding somewhere, but
it's the second sentence actually.
Okay.
Wow.
It's weird, but yeah.
FAQ
as a license.
Although, I mean, I even want to point out in here that they say you can run it for non-production workloads, I think, is in the FAQ for yourself.
But they clarify what that is, because that is really all production uses are permitted other than hosting or embedding. Yeah. So.
Oh yeah, that was updated, I guess.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a if you think of a firewall rule, block all, then allow.
Yeah.
So block all, then allow.
Yeah.
And that's what they did with this FAQ.
I don't think that this bullet was as clear the last time I read the license, so that it's better that it's this way. Yeah, that was in mid-October, I guess. So yeah.
Cool. All right.
So presumably you could continue to use Terragrunt and everything else, but we also don't want to speak for for grunt work, but my guess is that they're not going to be testing new features and things that they add in that against the commercial versions beyond 1.6. They'll test them against OpenTofu and make sure that it works with OpenTofu.
Yeah, let's see how we're checking in on the releases here. So 1.6 beta 4. So getting closer to an actual release, hopefully.
I actually saw that the weekly newsletter said that 1.4 is going to be, beta 4 is going to be the last beta before they got a production release.
Very cool. That'll be super exciting. And obviously, enormous amount of work went into this. And I think every subsequent release will go a little bit smoother, a little bit faster, and not be as much effort. I've also seen somewhere, the companies are staffing up, they're hiring full-time positions as they intended to. So proper attention is going to this. It's a real initiative. And also, Michael, I know you joined late, but if you listen to the recording, there were some other things we talked about in the first half hour. I think you were asking in the Slack channel about joining.
Oh yeah, I signed up, but I did not receive
an email. Oh, weird.
Or if I did, it went to my spam. Nope, nothing.
Okay, I'll follow up with you in a DM and try and figure that out, because if that happens to you, it might be happening with others.
Cool.
Are you on like an Azure or Microsoft account by any chance, or are you on Gmail?
No, I'm not. I'm using Proton Mail.
Proton Mail. Okay.
Quick question: Do you guys only hire in the United States, or do you only hire? Do you optimize for U.S. time zones?
More the latter, but at this time, the majority of our team is in the U.S. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just looking at. I think I've seen some roles come through the Slack or somewhere else, and most of them are just U.S. remote.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's just the landscape as such. The hiring landscape is complicated, especially when you go internationally. So if you're interested, you can always feel free to reach out to us. you can reach out to me directly. Always Eric at cloudposse.com. Yeah.
I think companies have just been scarred by, and I hate to generalize, and this is being recorded, so I think companies have been scarred because I've been on the opposite side where, consultants have done pretty bad jobs or have been hard to communicate with.
Yeah.
And
Cloud Posse was built entirely on consultants, subcontractors, and honestly, we were bit more by US laws on that. So it's gotten even complicated in the US working with contractors. So general advice now is, know where you're operating and how to follow the corresponding laws there. It's gotten very complicated. I wish it didn't.
I mean, mostly the issue is the People's Republic of California.
Yeah, and then other states are starting to copy that.
What is that about?
Just the laws about consultant, like who's a consultant versus who's an employee and who you owe benefits to and all these other things. Like I think it stemmed out of the explosion of things like TaskRabbit and Uber and DoorDash and all of those things. And it is accidentally spilled over into like technology consultants and lawyers and other things that I don't think they actually intended it to spill over into, but nonetheless, that is the law, and they're now enforcing it at like crazy levels that we would have never expected would be the case. If you looked at it, years ago, you'd be like, what?
Yeah. Look up the AB5 law. That's what really sucks.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm guessing most of the people here that I can see are all working at Cloud Posse, or are you guys?
No, we got about 3 on the call right now. Matt,
okay.
Dan, myself. I wasn't counting myself. But yeah, so I didn't realize how much over we are. I enjoyed the conversation too much. So I do need to end things here. Hope to see you, Michael, on the next call. It goes for everyone else here on the call. Same time, same place next week. We will have a recording of this session in our office, in our YouTube channel. You can register for these and get the invitation, provided it works. Just got a report that maybe it isn't working for everyone. Those registrations are at cloudposse.com/officehours here. Our Slack team, join us at slack.cloudposse.com. And lastly, if you are interested in seeing if Cloud Posse can move the needle for you at your organization, please go to cloudposse.com/quiz, answer a few quick questions, and you'll book a meeting with me directly, and we'll work through your situation. Thanks, everyone, for the awesome discourse, and we'll see you next week.